welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to another episode of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, folks, I am in airplane mode, and now a man who thinks the theme to the show Cheers sounds like a jingle for a whorehouse. A man who needs no introduction. How are you doing today?
Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and you're always glad you
They're always glad you
leave.
came. Yep.
You want to be where troubles are all the
Some
same.
are all the
You
same.
want to go where everybody knows your name.
Oh
Argument
man.
quod erat demonstratum. You're welcome, America.
Oh, it's such a good one, man. That's such a good one. We gotta bring that back, man. That's phenomenal. Hey, Carrion. Hey, Wayne. Good to see you.
Yeah, hello. I'm doing well, man. Life is good.
Yeah. So tell everybody what's going on with you. Tell everybody the good news.
Sure. There are a few things. The people that were working on my truck, I have a 57 Chevy truck. They're supposed to be doing some chassis work for me, some fancy body work. I got my truck back from them because they were just taking my money and not getting the job done. I'll be suing them and their wives, and I talked to a sheriff's detective to see if it would be considered fraud or conspiracy to defraud me. So I'll be taking all of them to court and asking the judge about criminal proceedings for them. That's not what's so great. My fiance is here after almost, I'd say a year and a half of waiting for the immigration process, doing it all legal, waiting for the immigration process. She arrived in the United States and now she's here. So my stress level has decreased because we don't have I don't know, it's kind of a burden waiting when there's all this. She's from a country where you're just not so sure what tomorrow's going to be like. Maybe that's
Right.
everywhere. But there were some real concerns. And when she got the pass to travel, the visa to travel, I thought she'd be here middle of next month. I mean, sorry, in December.
Wow.
But
Wow.
there were some conditions happening where it just made it evident, get her out now. So we got her out immediately, and she flew first class, where she was surprised to get a nice meal and all this special treatment, and it was
Wow.
wonderful.
Wow.
So she she's here. She's adapting well. I took her into a store. Where did we go? We went into a Walmart, and the look on her face, she's from a communist country. The look on her face to see the abundance of unnecessary and necessary things blended together in a large building was fascinating to her.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
in her country, when you go to a grocery store, they might have, this is not a joke, they might have a total of maybe 150 different items. So they'll have, let's say it's mustard. They might have 30 jars of mustard there on the shelf. Who knows what they have in the stock room, but on the shelf. But that's one of those 150 items. It's not like you walk into a grocery store in the United States where if you just wanted breakfast cereal, there's 60 of them right there, 60 different
Yeah.
brands you can get.
Yeah.
They're not like that there. You can go into a grocery store and they won't have meat, or they won't have cheese, or they don't have milk, or they don't
Yeah.
have eggs. So to see all of that here, she was fascinated. And we went to a grocery store called Vallarta, which I had told her about and sent her videos from. It's aimed at sort of a Latin audience, but whatever. If you need to buy something, they're probably going to have it if it's groceries. And she was just amazed to see it, when we walked through there. And I was like, yeah, this is kind of how it is all over.
Yeah, we not
Um,
only have the crazy grocery stores, we actually have in some places, entire ethnic grocery stores that are
yeah,
geared to certain cultures, which are essential because you can't get the ingredients for a lot of stuff if you don't have those stores. But but for a lot of people in those communities, that is their bread and butter grocery store. They go there for almost everything.
For everything, yeah.
So it becomes a full grocery store. Yeah, that's definitely crazy.
I want to area. Thank you, Carrie. And I want to answer your question. And
Yeah,
thank
she's a
you.
Christian.
Yeah, is she a believer of anything? Carrie Ann, my beloved fiance, is a Christian. She believes in God and Jesus and the Afro-Cuban religion, which I've only gotten bits and pieces of meaning of, what it's about. And even when I was there, only just understood it just a tiny bit. So she knows that I am outspoken atheist. And I told her, I'm happy if she wants to do things like baptisms and christenings, which are part of her culture. We can go ahead and do all that. It's for all the way I see it, they're just sprinkling water on a baby or something like that and saying some ceremonial words. It, in my opinion, it's just tradition. It has no power other than sort of in my view, it has no power other than making her feel good that she is now carrying on the tradition with the kids. I'm fairly certain any child of mine will have bad jokes from the day they can speak and also be an atheist. And I told her I'm happy to take the children around to different churches and things like that, or religious gatherings and things, just so they can see. And if she wanted to continue to go to church or start going to church or what have you, I'd be happy to give her at least 2 Sundays in months with 4 Sundays and 3 in months with 5. And she's like, no, we don't have to go to church. And I was like, school.
Yeah, that to me is an indicator of a person who is like a cultural thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
If they don't feel the need to she's gonna love it. Here we have 10,000 flavors of Jesus. Oh man.
Oh yeah, we do. James, hello, good to see you here. Some even come in cheese and wine. True.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about the problems of paradise, and I think it's a really important topic because, I think hell gets all the attention, right? It's easy for people to, um, have these back and forths about what hell is and how pernicious it is. To be honest, it's a topic that I think a lot of people are going along with traditions and going along with what's said in their culture, and it's never really put to them as a challenge. I remember asking my mother, like, do you think I'm gonna go to hell or I deserve to go to hell? And she said no, which was the right answer. But it's kind of like, well, the follow-up question is, well, then why are you still worshiping a faith that
Wait, where did you go?
says that I will? I don't know. It
Where
looks
did you
like
go?
your camera just vanished. I'm still here. I haven't gone anywhere.
Pocket locker.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I lost you, man.
You lost me? Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Oh, you check your audio settings. I haven't changed anything.
I can't hear you. I'll drop out and come back in. I don't know why I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'll let the liberal Christians play their own game. I'm not here. I don't think there is such thing as humane Christianity. I think it's really anti-human. It's unfortunate, but I don't buy liberal Christianity. I think it's people putting their own secular humanity into their faith and trying to rebrand Christianity in their own image. Good for them. I just I don't want to participate in it because I can't do so honestly. I think the faith is anti-human. I think it's pernicious. And I think you just need to read the Bible to understand that. And I'm just a person who, you know, where I'm at, we're better off without religion. So I don't, promote people who try to make the religion softer. I just think that's it's not the way I go with things. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this. And can you hear us okay, my one black friend?
I hear you now. Yes.
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and roll this tape.
Welcome to Mindshift. I'm Brandon, and today we are talking about the problems with paradise. Now, this is a bit different considering how much we've been talking about hell lately, but I want to focus on it because I think it takes all of the excuses out.
Like Dr. Bird.
Okay, you don't want to admit that hell is unjust? Fine. Ridiculous, but fine. You want to believe that there is no hell because that makes it easier to accept God's morality? Fine. We can talk about annihilation, or we can talk about universalism, or any of these other things that get us out of the bind of what is, I think, somewhat clear in the New Testament. I'm open to the idea of those concepts being theologically correct. Not that there's any basis for any of them anyway, since this God does not exist. But then let's talk about heaven. Is heaven so great? Is heaven moral? What are the problems with this paradise? And there are many. Now, as a caveat, I should start off by saying there are many different concepts of heaven as well. How funny that we have this one true God, this one true religion, this perfect holy book communicating God's words to us, and yet we can't agree on heaven and hell, the afterlife, the whole pretense to the reason we need to do something in this life in a correct and specific way. That makes a great deal of sense. Anyways, are there different issues in how heaven is perceived? Yes, some people believe that it is a soul versus an actual spiritual body versus our physical bodies being reincarnated, etc., up into the heavens. That leads to their own set of problems. But I want to major in the majors. I think when most Christians, and I am talking about the Christian heaven here, the biblical heaven, think about heaven, they think about a few things, and I want to throw them out there. Will there be some of you in the comments who are like, well, technically that's not what I think? Fine. I'm majoring in the majors. Most people believe.
It's a good point. That's a good point. And honestly, at the end of the day, I'm not even interested in keeping up with everybody's individual interpretation of Christian, because what they really do is sort of go to their own corner of infallibility, meaning anything that is pointed out to them as a problem is a problem with somebody else's faith, not with theirs. So I think it's wise to do what he's saying is major in the major. My main thing is, the reason I think it's really powerful to talk about heaven is because there are so many Christians that don't believe in hell, and they will tell you they don't believe in hell. There are very few Christians that will tell you they don't believe in heaven. And again, there's so many things that at some point, to me, you're just like, I don't even know what it means to say you're a Christian anymore. And I got there myself. I was a Christian who did not believe at one point in heaven and hell. But at that point, I knew I was just culturally Christian. Like I knew I was no longer in line with the doctrine or the dogma, and that I was just a cultural believer who would tell you, I think, the book silly. I think we rely too much on the book. I mean, I was almost anti-biblical at that point, and it's just it's everybody can have their own opinion, but I do think most Christians believe in heaven, and they've never stopped to think that it's an immoral concept. And I think that it's an important thing to do, because I don't really think the concept of heaven is much better than the concept of hell. Matter of fact, I kind of think of them as flip sides of the same coin. It's an eternity spent at the dictate of a master, and whether or not you're suffering in hell or supplicating in heaven, neither actually sounds like a very good time to me. But the most pernicious thing about it to me is the fact that you are told that it's the party of all parties. It's going to be just an amazing time where suffering isn't even possible. Everything's going to be wonderful. All your dead relatives and loved ones, all your best friends, the pets you may have lost in this lifetime, all of them are going to be there. But you don't find out if you're on the list until after you die.
True.
To me,
According to the Lord.
to me, to buy into a religion like that, you just have to be a sucker. You just have to. You're just a sucker and a mark, and you might as well write "fool" across your forehead.
They've been sealed in their foreheads, have they?
Yeah, because there's no other area of life where we let somebody give us a sales pitch that we won't discover until we're dead.
This is true. I don't know that they're, I don't know. I hesitate to say that they're suckers because, well, in some areas, the laying on hands, I'm sorry, folks. You can try that at home. You don't even need to leave the house to know that's not true. But the promise of heaven is interesting because I would love to know, what are my responsibilities if I get to go to heaven? What are we doing there all day? If I love snow skiing, can I snow ski anytime I want? Am I
Right.
going to be instantly good at everything I do? Like I've never snowboarded. Am I going to be instantly as good as Shaun White, the Flying Tomato? Uh, am I going to be as good of a race car driver as Tony Stewart or Lewis
Right.
Hamilton? Am I just going to be flat awesome at everything I try to do, or am I supposed to like sweep up? Is that my duty? I have to, like at a monastery, right? Everyone, all the monks have a function to take care of the community. Am I going to have to do that? Or is it going to be like that Joe Nichols song? Not Joe Nichols, I forget his name. Buddy something, maybe. Buddy Jewel. Am I going to be an angel helping pour out the rain onto the earth when it's time for it to rain on the earth? Am I going to be some sort of custodian of the hoarfrost, as you might read about in the book of Enoch? Am I in charge of those
My
things?
understanding is you actually don't do anything. The more that I think about this question, because I think it's a great question, I think there's
That
sort
was
of like,
2020.
yeah, I think there's like a, I think there's like a children's book version of heaven, and you're magically doing all of the things. But I think when serious like adults talk about heaven, it's mostly supposed to be you're so overwhelmed by the presence of God that you're just spending eternity in worship or supplication. Like it doesn't ever sound like you actually are doing anything. I
Well,
mean,
you're
like when I
you're. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say when I was a Christian, I wanted the fun version where I was like wrestling with Jesus and playing me. I remember like having to draw a
Wrestling
vision.
with Jesus.
Yeah, I had to like draw a vision of heaven once because I was working at a church and we had the kids like sketch out like what heaven was going to be like to them. Total indoctrination. And it's like scary that I did that. That was my job. And I did the activity along with them. And so like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
my heaven looked like a hybrid between the WWE Performance Center and Guitar Center, because that's what I thought eternal pleasure sounded like. But even
Mm-hmm.
in that exercise, there was so much revealing because everybody had a different version. Everybody created the heaven in their imagination to be, what they wanted, what paradise was like to them. Um,
Right.
yeah.
Well, I, I've read the book of Revelation. I don't know how many times. It's over 100 times. And there are people complaining in heaven, like, when are we going to be avenged for those who for being martyrs, God? When's that going to happen? I'm like, how effing miserable are you if you're in heaven? And what you think about is when God is going to get you some revenge for the people who hurt you. And wait a second, aren't they dead now too? We're 2,000 years later. Are they still whining, wanted to be fought for or avenged? Are they still whining about that? I mean, really, can't they just get over it and start enjoying all those wonderful things? The being in the amazing glow of God, who can appear as a bush or whatever the heck he wants. I mean, isn't that better? They get all the South Park episodes if they're even written up there. Every TV is a widescreen TV, every a chicken in every pot in the car in every garage. I don't know how great it's supposed to be, but it seems to me that as people who wrote the Bible wrote about heaven, they weren't entirely in agreement of what the place would be like. They just, I think they just kept making it up. It's very ad hoc. One of the Psalms has God flying through the skies on the back of a cherubim. And yet, if you keep reading the Bible, God has wings. Well, which is it? If you got wings, why are you riding on the back of your cherubim? I mean, it looks great that, there's that biblical equivalent of He-Man's battle cat, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's a solid, consistent narrative to me. It just doesn't.
So
Carrie Chrysler, she said,
good.
I've seen some African healers do that kind of work on Esther's channel, James. I don't know what James's question was. I'm not real slick on this app. I'm using my phone and not a computer for this. I don't know what James said. When I'm old, I'm gonna go to a laying on hands church and tell all the old widowers my junk needs healing. Okay, yeah, James, you should have tuned in a few weeks ago to Hot Program, where there was that kind of thing going on. Pocket Locker, are you still there?
Yeah. So
Okay.
there's a question I need to ask you from a YouTube punk, which is, how do you feel about carbon fiber? If you had a muscle car, would you put a carbon fiber hood on it?
Uh, I think carbon fiber is a waste of money unless you like the look of it. Most people, when you build a car or truck or whatever, um, if you just like its appearance and you can afford it, or you have the skill to even make something, I say go for it. But as far as it helping your vehicle be a better vehicle, I don't think so. I don't think so. Um, in competition, yes, you'll be lighter. Your car will be lighter. Um, but what does that translate into top speed? Might you be better off spending money modifying your brakes, engine, tires, and suspension to go faster than making your car lighter with carbon fiber? My Firebird will probably not have any carbon fiber on it at all. My truck, not one single square inch of carbon fiber will be in that truck. But it's not supposed to be fast. My car will be fast, but still no carbon fiber. Not even the hood scoop. I thought he was referring to
All
pimping out the
right.
Bible.
All right. No. That was a request from YouTube punk. All right, here we go.
Okay.
That heaven is eternal. It goes on forever and it does not end. Most people think that they will be in heaven in some physical sense, that we will be able to recognize other people, that there will be food, that there will be places, that there are streets made of gold, that these are physical, tangible realities. We are not just floating in a cloud in perfect bliss. We are actually doing things, mainly worshiping God. But there are feasts where we will eat. Supposedly we will have mansions, we will have our crowns, all of these other very materialist things. Like, how unimportant would gold be in heaven, right? What would give it its value? It wouldn't be rare.
Exactly.
Everything is made of gold there. Are we supposed to remember from our earthly experience on this one particular planet, even though there's probably life on other planets, that gold was a limited resource here for a period of time that made it valuable? Like, how man-made is this concept? But again, I'm giving this to all of you. Let's just assume that the descriptions of heaven are accurate as they are described in the Bible.
Pocket
Let's
Locker.
assume that it goes on forever. Let's assume that
So the gold streets in heaven, I've said this on Hot Program before, but for our new viewers, the gold streets in heaven are not made of gold, such as a watch, maybe your Omega watch, right? It's not made of that gold. It's gold in color, like fine glass. So it's sort of like an amber color.
Right.
That's all. So think of this. If you're on Earth and you've never ventured into heaven at all, or even been in any sort of aircraft, and you're looking at a sunset, the color of the sky might go amber, right as the sun is setting and the clouds are just being their beautiful selves as the sun is shining through it. So it's not gold as we think of gold. It's the color.
Yeah, but I think he's, like you said, I think he's majoring, like you said, he's going to major with the majors, and I think
Right, that's
the
what
depiction
people think
is,
that.
they say it's
People
paved with gold. So,
exactly. Yeah, that's the belief, and it's wrong. Even unto its own book, it's wrong.
I just also want to touch on the immortality thing. I think Christians are faking it. Again, Uncle Bobby says the best part about Christianity is that it has absolutely no follow-up. Listen, gang, there is a competition that goes on between Christians every Sunday, and it's recapitulated every Monday around the water cooler. The loser of this competition is the person who says, yeah, my church, man, we don't play around. I have to be up at 9 o'clock to be at Bible study by 9:30. We start morning service around 11. It tends to go till 2. Then we're back at 5 for afternoon fellowship. And then we might have another fellowship service at 8 o'clock. And man, I'm telling you, from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., we're worshiping God nonstop. Okay, the winner of that competition is the person who says, oh, no. We get in there, we hit it with about 3 or 4 songs. Pastor comes up and preaches for about 20 minutes. We hit it with another song or two. And from walking in the sanctuary to walking out the sanctuary is no more than an hour. Right? Christians, you don't want to spend all afternoon worshiping God.
Nope. Isn't that telling? That's not something I put a lot of thought in about today's topic. Yeah, it's very telling. I guess when we read in the Old Testament, in the book of Acts, how the community combined their resources together. They sold all they had and had everything in common. Communism. Everybody had what they needed. No person lacked anything. Communism. And so these people were committed about being together. They were committed to, I guess, church is that place where you go meet people who are friendly but not your friends, and you would never have most of them over for dinner at your house. And it's nice to see them once a week, but most of them you'll never see more than once a week. Never. Not because you're too busy, just because you're not into it that much. But yeah, I think if a lot of people we see complaining in politics about, oh, this ought to be a Christian nation and Christian values ought to be at the forefront, they would be absolutely terrified to know what the Bible really says and what the Bible is really asking them to do and give up. There'd be no immigrant crisis. I wanted to post something about Joe Biden letting all these illegal, well, I guess they're not illegal if he allows it, immigrants into the country. Well, the Bible says you're supposed to be kind to the stranger, for you were strangers in Egypt, right? Be kind. You're supposed to accommodate those people. You're supposed to assist and help those people, not create these dangerous traps so they can't cross the border, not shoot at them, not kill them. None of that. You're supposed to be the helping hand standing right there to greet them in Christianity. Now, that isn't my policy necessarily, but if someone comes, we did the legal path. So I see that it works. It takes forever and a day, but it works.
Right. It's like, they're supposed to feed the sick and
yes.
Feed the hungry and take care of the sick.
Take care of you should feed the sick too. They'll die without food.
Visit the people that are in prison. And all of this stuff, and they don't do it. They won't even support their organizations doing it. They literally don't. Again, don't come talk to me about feeding the hungry or clothing those who don't have clothes if you don't pay your taxes. Because again, that's the basic number one of donating and contributing to the public good. What most people do is they go beyond that to say, oh, I also, send my old goods and clothing to the Salvation Army instead of throwing them out. I volunteer at the soup kitchen over here, or I contribute some money to this food pantry that serves the local community. It's amazing to me that, again, the secular standard is pay your taxes to the public good and then go above and beyond that for your charitable works. And the Christians, it's don't pay taxes, and if a couple times throughout your life you volunteer for a couple hours, you're good to go. You're a great person all of a sudden. So that's a problem. But yeah, Christians, y'all, they don't really want to worship God forever. They really don't. They like I said, they don't want to worship God all day on Sunday. So
I would say go ahead, Pakman.
I was just gonna say, how many people are sitting in church just waiting, hoping it's over by 12:30 so they can get home and watch the football game? They want to spend more time on Sunday watching football than they want to be in church. Can't blame them, by the way.
Football's real.
Yeah, exactly.
Real.
There is some.
Sorry, you were gonna say something. Go ahead.
Sure. I think one of the
I'm clicking random stuff.
It's okay. One of the better tests to see if someone is truly faithful is the tithing test. Giving 10%. For instance, I've talked about being in running for public office and things like that. And I would have a real hard time giving money to churches if there's like a disaster, like a tornado. I'm like, you're supposed to have insurance, and you're supposed to have God on your side. If your God is telling you, I want your church torn down, why should I chip in FEMA money to cover the rebuilding of the church? If the church didn't pay taxes, the church has made $0 contributing to the fund that goes to rebuilding things like that. How can I say we should just give them the money? In fact, I would think if you just asked around to other churches that weren't destroyed, you would see this outpouring of love, support, community, and people would come from thousands of miles away to help you rebuild. You don't need a dime of government money for that.
Right.
You just need to ask.
And you rarely see that, because First Baptist is not about the rebuild, Second Baptist.
Well, ask. I mean, I really think, in my eyes, I guess I take the Bible seriously in when it talks about building the Christian.
Oh, he got zoinked again. Zapped. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's just a connection or his machine or what.
God. But there are feasts where we will eat. Supposedly we will have mansions, we will have our crowns, all of these other very materialist things. Like, how unimportant would gold be in heaven, right? What would give it its value? It wouldn't be rare. Everything is made of gold there. Are we supposed to remember from our earthly experience on this one particular planet, even though there's probably life on other planets, that gold was a limited resource here for a period of time that made it valuable? Like, how man-made is this concept? But again, I'm giving this to all of you. Let's just assume that the descriptions of heaven are accurate as they are described in the Bible. Let's assume that it goes on forever. Let's assume that there is some sense of us that is still us, that is there, and that we will be doing what God says we will be doing, which is being a new creation, having some new perfect body that is able to worship Him. And there are things we also don't get. There are no tears, death, sorrow, or sin. Those are 4 things in Revelation that are very clear we do not have in heaven. So with all of that as our setup, let's cover
all right, no
what
tears.
I think
Sorry, the only thing you missed so far was streets are, everything's gold, we're living forever, and then there's no death, suffering, sorrow, or sin.
Being about a list of 7 problems. Let's start off simple and with a really easy one. How about just eternal monotony? I'm talking boredom. I'm talking the very first thought most of us had as kids when we heard about heaven. Now, some of our parents told us, oh, it's great, you'll be riding flying horses and eating whatever food you like the best and all of these things. But that's not the reality. Many of us were told about the worship part, that we would endlessly, eternally be worshiping God. Now, maybe some of that are correlating worship incorrectly, and we thought of the praise and worship parts parts of service at church and we thought, oh, I don't want to do that forever. Maybe worshiping God is just living perfectly. Maybe that brings glory to him. But the actual descriptions we get of worship are closer to the first one. They are about songs that are sang, instruments that are played, our bodily position of being bent over and bowed down, etc. That does not sound fun. But Brandon, you don't understand. We'll be filled with the light. We'll be filled with God's presence. We'll be right there. We'll be compelled to do nothing else. There will be no greater thing you could do for eternity than praise God. I'm going to skip the narcissistic parts of how ridiculous it is that this God who wants a relationship with us is having an end goal where the vast amount of all time, like if eternity...
I won't skip it because I'll just say briefly, it's an abusive relationship. And it creates
that way now.
And there's
that way now.
Yeah, and there's two abusive relationships. Christians are in an abusive relationship with God, again, to want this glory, to need to be worshipped, everything's about him. That is the definition of it. None of us would encourage a marriage in which a wife told us it was her duty to supplicate her husband, to worship him 24/7, and live in constant fear of his judgment and wrath. But it creates an abusive relationship with those of us who are in relationships with Christians. And this is the part nobody wants to talk about and nobody wants to acknowledge because it's going to create a very uncomfortable conversation around the dinner table. But again, like the fact that you can't tell somebody the truth without them being upset and offended creates this crazy unequal power dynamic where they're literally allowed to tell you that they're living this life for the next, and you're not allowed to say, yeah, that just sounds like a bunch of nonsense to me. Yeah, that just totally doesn't even make any sense. So, but yeah, it's a totally abusive relationship to then think that like, oh yeah, it's great that you want to forsake the real needs of people and loved ones and family members now because you're storing up your treasures in heaven.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that if we examine the life of most Christians closely, we would actually be able to see where putting God before man causes them to do things that we would consider abusive to their loved ones. And that's the problem. It's this God who needs glory and supplication and is constantly the center of attention leads to a relationship in real life with Christians who need to put this God above all else in their lives. And I think it has real consequences. All right, we think my one black friend's back. Are you having issues with your phone? Is that your computer over there?
I'm having issues with my phone. I will be right back. I will be listening though.
Okay.
I'm gonna mute
great.
myself and turn off the video, but I'll be listening.
Got you.
Uh-huh.
Is real. If infinity is a concept and you live 120 years, take it to the max here. It doesn't matter. It's like nothing. It's literally more comparable to zero than any other number.
Yep.
That means that God's intention, his design for all time is just to have his robotic slaves worshiping him. Why would he need this? Why would he want this? I'm serious. Like if you really zoom out, it makes no sense and it sounds absolutely awful. Talking more on the monotony front, I really believe that something that never ends, right? That we're going to run into a series of repeatable events forever. I really think a lot of people who haven't thought about deep time or haven't read mathematical books on the concept of infinity and things like this, which is a huge interest of mine, I absolutely fascinates me. They have a hard time conceptualizing, and I do too. I'm not like, oh, I read a few books, now I get it. Like, it's an impossible thing to conceptualize, but there are some visualizations and some kind of thought experiments that one can do to help get them further down the road. And the further down the road you go towards the concept of infinity, the more you realize there's no good version of it. There can't be. Nothing can go on forever and be a good thing. And
this is again, gang, we really need to start hitting people with this. Heaven and hell are flip sides of the same coin, because when you stretch anything out to eternity, it becomes torture. Okay. Man, I love playing drums, especially in front of a big crowd, especially playing music. The main thing, it's not about the drum solo, it's not about the chops, it's not about the girls. None of that is the high. The super high is playing music that people love and enjoy, because you are playing the music, they're singing, they're dancing, they're lifting their hands, they're shouting. I mean, they're into it. That is the high. That feedback between performer and audience. I play the song, you sing the song. Oh, that is amazing. Okay. None of us wants to play a gig again that lasts all night. Why? Because it's just torture. It's
It's
monotony.
torture.
You run out of songs. It's difficult. And it's not special if it's just always going on. It actually makes me think of sports. You brought up, if I go to heaven, am I just automatically like amazing at everything I do? If so, it wouldn't be amazing anymore. Right? If everyone drove as good as Lewis Hamilton, we would not care about the special gifts that Lewis Hamilton, demonstrates when he races, right? And I'll give you a name that demonstrates this: Max Verstappen. Right? Like, Max Verstappen is one of Lewis Hamilton's rivals. For those who don't know, Max Verstappen is not only the most recent last Formula One world champion, he's also an iRacing, sim racing world champion. He is literally considered the best driver in the physical world and the virtual world. And for years, he still kept losing and falling short of Lewis Hamilton. And he had to have a whole different style. He's like way more aggressive, and he does crazy things on the track. And some of those crazy things allowed him to win, but then they also made him lose and have accidents. And it was crazy. And then finally, after years of being one of the best drivers in the world, and then jumping into the computer in the video game and being one of the best drivers virtually, he finally cracked that ceiling and won a championship and beat Lewis Hamilton. And that's why it matters, because it's hard, because so few people can do it, because it's limited. You've only got a limited window of your life to compete at that level. You've got companies, and if you don't have the fastest car or the best sim program or the best whatever, all the tires and the materials, it just can't happen. But when you put us in a situation where none of that is limited, none of that is special, the Grand Prix are long as it is. The Grand Prix just never ends. It's just lap after lap. You love racing, so the race just never stops. Anything taken to eternity becomes indistinguishable from torture.
Yeah, even though the race at Le Mans is over in 24 hours,
Yeah. Oh my goodness. None believe it's a great point. I can't even. First off, I don't really like drum solos. My question anytime I hear drum solos, what song is that? Yeah, exactly. It's just not the same, right? You can't sing along to a drum solo. People go, woo, oh my God, yeah, but they don't. You can't. There's no song. There's no groove. There's no. It's not gonna make a magical night. But I feel you. But yeah, even a 5-minute drum solo, I can't do 5 minutes. 2 minutes, mate. Y'all, a 2-minute drum solo. I should play one for you. A 2-minute drum solo is long. You're like, I'm very impressed, but when is this going to be over? It's 2 minutes.
By the way, speaking of musical instruments, I have to have a moment of selfishness here. I'm selling my 20th anniversary Fender Esquire jazz bass, sunburst in flawless condition. Direct message me if you want.
Oh my goodness.
Selling it. Not the amp though.
That's crazy. It's a very expensive guitar.
It's very expensive. But I'm selling it. Truck parts.
I see.
Every possible occurrence of anything that can be done in heaven, a billion, trillion, quadrillion, Google times a billion times over forever, and it will be just the beginning. just the blink of an eye of how many more times you'll do it again. But that's just a little teaser to get us started. I've already realized that I've mixed kind of points 1 and 2 here, which is monotony and slavery. So let's just kind of combine this point 1 and 2, and I'll continue to talk about it. Now, a lot of the excuses for this are again going back to, but you don't understand, we've never been in the very presence of God. We could spend an eternity worshiping him and it would be amazing. Well, this then leads to that second point that we've already mixed in a little bit, which is slavery. Heaven sounds like eternal submission, right? Can I choose to leave? That would be question number 1. Can I opt out? Can I choose oblivion at some point? Maybe after 2 billion years, I'm just really done with this concept. Can I leave? No, I can't leave. Well, Brandon, it's not so much that you can't leave, it's that God wouldn't have you have the desire to leave. So God's controlling me. God's controlling my mind. God's controlling my will and my desires. He's forcing it. He's compelling it by his very presence. That's slavery. I don't care what positive spin you want to put on it because you've called God a good thing. I'll even, for all of this that we're talking about today, I'm going to entertain the idea that this God is actually somehow good, just, and moral, which is already so problematic, right? But I'm trying to really just think like, okay, you guys are all right. This God is real. Hell doesn't exist. There's oblivion and annihilation and universalism and all of these things. How is heaven going? And the very fact that I have no say in the matter, I have no say that that's the only alternative, right? Like with universalism, or that it's the, sure, maybe it is better than hell. I'll give you that. But the lesser of two evils doesn't make it beneficial or good. And God forcing it to be good, right? Like if I can't even choose to think how I want to feel about it, to have my own experience, if every single person who's ever lived, think about how different we all are. If we're all going to have exactly perfect, repeatable, and expected outcomes in heaven to experience everything in the exact same way, what's the point? How on earth could we all agree on that without some coercion, some...
And it does sound like slavery because slaves all felt the same way about slavery. They all hated it. And and obviously they should. But Christopher Hitchens puts this so well that, you know, for so many people, the heaven is sort of it puts you like FOMO, like the fear of missing out, like that idea of there's a party, it's a great party, and eventually you're gonna check out, you're gonna leave, and the party's gonna go on without you.
That's right.
That, you know, that's sort of life in a nutshell. But he'd always say, but the heaven proposition is now you're at a work party, you can't leave, and even though you're staying forever, you have to enjoy yourself. The boss insists on it. You know, and again, that just doesn't sound any better to any of us. Matter of fact, if most of us think about how we feel again on Earth, y'all, if there is a mandatory work party and everybody has to go and attend it, and you can't leave. Let's say it starts at 8 and you guys are all told in a staff meeting on Friday, you have to stay there till at least 11. You don't even want to go to the party anymore. They could literally be like, oh, the food's going to be slamming. We brought in the best band. It's just going to be amazing. There's going to be all types of games and festivities. It's just going to be fun, food, festivities. Everything's wonderful. You don't want to go. Why? Because somebody told you you had to go. And part of us in our brains understands people don't force us to do things that are really going to be fun. So if it's really going to be that great, they probably wouldn't make us go. And the fact that they're making us go makes us not want to go. We would rather stay home, watch TV, and eat Cheetos and order pizza from takeout that's boring than have this 5-star meal that somebody forced us to go to. That is what force means. And so it's so weird that people act like this is a great thing to have compelled upon you. Like we don't want to be at this eternal party.
No, I think it's fair to say, if you even look at your earthly experiences that aren't, I'd say whatever, maybe like a personal thing, You mentioned drums. It doesn't matter what it is, how pleasurable something is. You probably don't want it to continue forever, like nonstop. I've never done drugs. Um, I I took some Vicodin once per the nurse's direction, and it messed me up for a solid 4 hours. And I don't want to go back to how that felt. I've spoken
Wow,
on this
even though you
show
needed
before.
it, yeah.
Even though I needed it to kill pain, I had a inguinal hernia, and they did the surgery for it. She says, "Take two of these." I should not have taken two of those, and I refused to take another one after those two. My friend was
Wow.
laughing at me because I called her panicking, saying what I was describing to her what I was seeing, and she goes, "You are high,"
Wow.
and I didn't want to be high. So,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
if you take a pleasurable experience, regardless of how, whether it's just something you do or it's something, I'll throw the biggest card out I have. The most pleasurable experience of my life, and it's too small to call it pleasurable, was years ago, about 7 years ago, when I almost died. I had a near-death experience because my body was shutting down. My brain was shutting down. Just system after system in my body was shutting down because I didn't know I had diabetes, and my blood sugar was much too high to register on the meter.
Wow.
Um, and I was in the Caribbean when this happened, and one nurse after another said, "You should be dead." The doctors, I had two different doctors there. "You should be dead." I came back to the United States. The doctor that I went to see the next day, she says, "Yeah, you should be dead." So I have a lot of people told me, "Yeah, dude, that should have killed you." It's amazing that you're standing here today. But that's having competent nursing staff who figured out what was wrong with me and saying, "You'll be fine. You'll be
Right.
fine." It's that simple. But that experience of laying on that bed in my oceanfront apartment, watching the waves roll in and feeling a complete lack of difference, right, between myself and other things I was observing. The lamp in the room, the bed I was on, the waves, the sand, the wind, the trees, all of that was me, because my brain was saying, the part of my brain that says,
Mm-hmm.
those things aren't you, those are external. That's a tree. That's not you. That's the sand blowing across the beach. That's not you. You are not the beach. You are not the sand. You're not the waves. You're not the water, blah, 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 blah. All those things are different than you. All that vanishing and feeling this incredible oneness with all that is. I didn't want that to continue forever. It was not at all terrifying. Again, it was superb. The feeling of it was superb.
Right.
But I don't, it's not something I want to access again. There may be other people in the world who do. That might be why people shoot heroin or get drunk or whatever, because they get a sense of that, right?
Right.
You'll hear other people with near-death experiences say they want it to happen again because of the way they felt, which I find astonishing. But I guess to some degree, I get it.
Yeah,
I have my own version.
I'm
But
definitely not one of them.
yeah, you couldn't convince me to do it all over again. What is that noise? Are you hearing a really loud noise like bees?
It sounded like maybe somebody shoveling or something, but it sounds okay.
Okay. I think it's my tenant. Hold on.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
That's
it's my fiance vacuuming.
oh yeah.
Um, for
Okay.
for our for our viewers,
It's
she'd
fine
never
with the
used.
doors closed.
Okay, she'd never used a vacuum cleaner before.
So now she's excited about it.
I was looking at the look on her face and like, there's nothing more I could give her that would make her more happy than this vacuum right now.
Oh Lord.
And she's just watching it, and wait till she sees the Roomba.
Some
You
of
don't
us
even have to
are
touch it.
you should be feeling your privilege right now. A lot of us.
Yeah, we're spoiled here in the United States. We're
Yeah,
very
exactly.
spoiled.
some forced manipulation of our will and thought processes and feelings. Oh, we don't have will, thought processes, and feelings, so we are robots. We do have will, thought processes, and feelings. How? Show me how. How can I utilize them in heaven? If I can't think of alternate perspectives, if I can't come up with a better outcome, if there's just nothing different, if it can't end, like, do you guys understand really what this would seem like? And so many of you have justified the version of heaven as being so good because it's so much better than the alternative. But I'd encourage you to really think about, if hell didn't exist at all and someone just told you at the end of your life, here's what happens. You go, you get a new body, you don't feel pain anymore, you don't feel sorrow anymore, you're perfect, you're a perfect being, you can't grow, you can't get better at things, you can't develop a new skill or hobby, you can't improve, and your entire existence is simply to shout over and over, holy, holy is the name. Is that something you would willingly sign up for? And don't just say yes because you're still afraid of death or you're still afraid of hell and you're not sure what happens in the afterlife, so at least this one doesn't have any pain in it, right? Like, are you just choosing it because it is, again, the lesser of two evils? Or does this make any sense at all? And if you really, no consequences, had the option to just stop existing after a certain amount of time, wouldn't that be preferable? Wouldn't you like to at least reserve that as an option? I think if anyone is honest, then they would. And if you're so caught up in your feelings and your emotions and the glory and presence of God that you can't have those faculties, then you are no longer you anyways. You are indeed a slave robot. You can't have it both ways. You're somehow an individual in heaven. You still get to pursue your passions and hobbies. How? First of all, the Bible doesn't even tell us that we can do that. Second of all, if we can't be sad, then we can't ever have messed up, right? Like, if I want to get really good at wood carving and I mess up, what does that look like in heaven? What does a mistake look like in heaven? How can one learn? How can someone improve? Again, like, the concepts here, the philosophical ideology of what heaven's issues are endless. And let's just say I'm wrong about so many of these facets that I don't think I can be wrong about, and we do get to grow in heaven, and we do actually excel, and there are layers to this. Well, that's going to lead to some unfairness problems, which I'm going to cover here in a few points. But before that, still, to what end? We're talking about eternity. I can only do so many hobbies. Like, do you understand? Everything that you can ever imagine is finite. We have a finite amount of things we can be interested in or do. We have a finite amount of times we can do them before we lose interest. We have a finite amount of growth that we can do in any particular subject. This simply doesn't work. Eternity is never going to be a good thing, no matter how you spin it. I don't want to live forever. I honestly do not believe there is any good version of heaven. If it's a choice and I get to talk to some creator at the end of all of this, I don't care who the creator is or what his plan or her plan or its plan is for an afterlife, I would honestly prefer at some point, maybe I want to check it out for 500 years, but at some point, I want the option to not exist, to not be conscious, to not participate. I could talk about.
So I'm glad he said it. This is something I actually talk about a bunch. It took some coming around to, especially as a former Christian. But again, I do not want to live forever. I don't want to die right now. Knock on wood. I suffer from depression, so actually, I actually treat it as a victory that I don't want to die today, because it's definitely not a guarantee with my psychological state. But at some point, I want to die, and I'm afraid of dying. I'm not afraid of being dead, and that's a big distinction that I think most people, even Christians, need to make. You're not really afraid of being dead, because being dead is going to just be exactly like what it was before you were born. And I think that that's the natural process of returning to that. And so I'm a person who I think we could, and it's an important point, gang, because we're not just saying, I don't think heaven's real, or I don't think heaven's all it's cracked up to be. You're really getting the person to think about, is this something you would even want? Right? Yes. I think that notion, even Christians say it, rest in peace. That's what I want to do. I want to just shut it off, and it's done. Yeah.
Well, Christianity also says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Father. So I guess you zip right up there in some respects, and yet in other respects, that's not really the expectation. You don't zip right up there.
Yeah.
You sort of linger behind. one of my brothers, he said to me when I was telling him about that experience, he said that to me and I was an atheist when this near-death experience occurred, uh, and not a new one. It wasn't like a fresh idea that I was an atheist. I'd been an
Right.
atheist for years. And he said to be absent from the body is to be present with the Father. And I love him dearly. I don't want to just say, no, bro. I was dying. My brain was shutting down. I really, there was a very slim chance that if one or two more things had gone wrong, I wouldn't be here today.
But see, that's kind of what I was getting at with saying that a lot of us, and I genuinely believe this, so it's not a personal thing, but it's a lot of us are in abusive relationships with Christians because we let them do things to us we would not let other people do. It would be seen as insanely insensitive to have a close family member, especially a sibling, on death's doorbed and interpret it as, oh, you were blessed with the spiritual experience. Well, the book says, hey, man. I mean, we only let people get away with that because of religion. There's no other domain of life that a person could interpret medical trauma that way, and we would still say like, oh, you're a great person, I love you, this is a wonderful relationship we have. And again, I think they've been taught that, they've been conditioned to think of things, but it almost reminds you of the way people thought you were possessed by a demon if you had epilepsy or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was, and it's sort of putting a positive spin on that. Like, oh, you were wigging out and you're on there. Oh, it must have been touched, by an angel type of thinking. And and again, like I think a lot of us feel like we have to see people as the victims of religion, not the perpetrators. They were sort of brainwashed. They've been indoctrinated. This is how they feel. This is how they've been conditioned to see the world, and so they respond this way. Fine, but let's at least step up our game and be a little bit more proactive to not let this get passed down for generation to generation to generations. That I probably won't have children, which means I won't have grandchildren or great grandchildren, but my imaginary grandchildren and great grandchildren do not need to be taught this stuff. They do not need to be reliving out all of this inhumanity and trauma. In terms of learning about different cultures of the world and different things like that, I can generally get with that because I see it as part of understanding humanity, understanding our history, understanding our roots and stuff like that. But, I would do it in a way that it's clear that I'm not actually encouraging them to participate or believe these things. We're just trying to expose them to it. And I think probably the right time would be, I think it's around the same time as the Santa Claus thing, because I think that's the same thing, that like it would be really abusive, I think, to continue to want your child to believe in nonsense, because you would be holding up their maturity, their development, their ability to cope with the world, right? You don't want to have the child who is insisting that Santa Claus is going to bring them a pony when you're 16 years old, you're a junior in high school, people are driving cars, and your classmates are just treating you like that's insane. So there comes a time when, whether it's because your classmate tells you, or in my case, you were sent out to the trunk, you were sent out to the car. In my case, you're like sent out to the car to retrieve some groceries and discovered, Santa's left behinds or whatever. But yeah, I think that's about the time when it's appropriate to tell your child, hey, there are some myths that we think are fun to share with children. That's where we get the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus, because I think those are all just the harmless myths. They are part of our culture, and I think whatever that time is, and I think it's gonna be different for everybody. But I think that's the time when a young person should transition it over to non-magical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think this problems with paradise topic, what he's saying, what we're saying, I think this might be when you're being proselytized to, this might be the absolute best thing to bring up. Instead of you getting the religious pitch, say the goal is to reach heaven, yes? And they'll say yes. And then, and I've said this before, I think the most unfair thing I could ever do to a Christian is ask questions about what heaven is like, what we do when we get there, and so on and so on, and get them to think about what they are saying. Because I think they know this much and they've not processed the meaning of this much. Wait a second, I'm going to be there forever and I'll be worshiping and praising God. Okay, well, how much time do you spend doing that now?
Right.
Well, I
Exactly.
do. And think about it. If it's an inconvenience here, right? If it's an inconvenience here, how could it possibly be all you want to do there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How can if it's not enough here, excuse me, if it's too much here, how can it be less than that there? How can it be less than too much? And you're locked into it. It's not even like a Scientology contract, which is for like 1 billion years or something like that. It's potentially, well, it's evidently longer than that. So I want to encourage everyone, if you are in that position, one of the things I wanted to do, I wanted to take my fiance down to Newport Beach in hopes that Ray Comfort would stop us while we were riding bicycles along the beach and start to ask us all his wonderful questions to see if I'm going to go to hell. Like, oh yeah, bring it on, man, bring it on.
Yeah, no,
Um,
this is really great because I agree.
mhm.
I think most Christians are gonna tell you they believe in heaven, and that's the heart of the gospel is that door is opened up to them by Jesus's sacrifice, and
That's
you
right.
know the hope, meaning, and purpose that they get from knowing that there's a better life to come. And so I do think this is a great topic to actually get into. And it's one you can just be asking genuine questions about that they likely, just like you said, they haven't had the time to they
They
haven't
haven't
really
really
thought
thought it through.
about it. Yeah.
I don't think they've thought it through.
I think I
And if they
honestly I was gonna say
go
for most
ahead.
people I think it's an identity. I really just think it's an identity thing.
Well, Christianity serves that purpose of uplifting a person, strengthening, I'd say, the confidence within their faith, maybe, and that helps them increase their own confidence, right? The idea that everything's going to be okay, everything works out, is reinforced again and again in Christianity. Well, we can find people that can give us. We can look at the people who survived slavery, who had horror stories, right?
Right.
But they also would have had, if we read their accounts, they would have good things to say. Sweet things did occur in their lives still. Maybe they had a child and their child wasn't sold off, right? They got to enjoy their child for a while. Maybe they were set free, and like the Bible says, their master actually gave them, former master, actually gave them substance so that they wouldn't go out and starve and fall into servitude again. You know,
Yeah.
that could happen. Sorry, my Dexcom thing is what's screwing up my connection here.
No, no worries.
Um, but I think it's important to know. Like, I don't think it's an entire waste when someone becomes a Christian. I just think they need to think it through a little more. Again, I've said it before, if it gets you off drugs, it's effing amazing, right? If you're on heroin, you're on whatever the other ones are, I don't even know.
Right.
It's fantastic. I support you. I'll help you pay your tithe one week, maybe. So
Yeah.
you feel super faithful. But I don't know that it has more benefits than it does detriment ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
All right.
I Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say let's try to get through a couple of reasons just because I gotta
Sure.
go at 5:30. But um, yeah, we'll try to get through a couple and respond to them in pairs or something.
About these first 2 points forever, but let's move on. This leads us to point 3, which is the free will issue. This is probably honestly one of the top 2 issues with heaven. Okay, so once again, we can't cry, we can't suffer, we can't feel pain, we can't die, etc. All of these things, again, straight from Revelation.
I'm gonna keep a note.
Are we good in heaven? Yeah, we're the epitome of good. We're as moral gets. Okay, so I can't suffer and I am good. I'm good all the time. Everything I do and say is good because it has to be, because otherwise it might bring suffering to me or to other people. It could bring sadness. It could bring sin. There's no sin in heaven. If there's no sin in heaven, then there's 100% only good moral things according to God. That right there 100% means there's no free will in heaven, because that is the entire defense for why we must have free will on earth. Now, I'm not the first to make this point, but maybe you haven't heard it, or maybe you've excused it, and I'm going to really ask you to consider this point if you claim to be a believer. Why does God let bad things happen? Well, you don't understand. It's not really God doing it or letting it happen here on earth, Brandon. He had to allow free will. We have to understand pain to understand pleasure. We have to be able to reject him so that he doesn't force us. God wouldn't want us just to be robots, okay? And that's the excuse for all of the atrocities on this earth. And if you really are too historically ignorant or too in your bubble to understand the realities of the horror of this world and of the history of this world, to think that that is somehow a justifiable excuse, I feel sorry for you. An all-powerful God could and should do better. But that's not what this is about. This is about heaven. So there is a concept of us being able to be perfectly moral and still experiencing joy and worshiping God and having connection with him, having communion with him, and all of the things that God wants from us without sinning, without suffering. And it's actually the plan for the majority of our existence ever when you consider eternity. So why have these 100 years of suffering, pain, and death for everyone? It makes no sense. You cannot have your cake and eat it too on this one. To be very clear, if there is sin in heaven, it's not heaven. It's not perfect. If there can't be sin in heaven, that means something is controlled, either our desire or our will, our ability. A lot of people will say, Brandon, again, you don't understand. In the presence of God, you won't want to sin. That is such a cop-out. Then why doesn't God share his presence with us here on earth? Well, because it would rob you of your free will. So his presence does rob us of free will. This is just beyond simple to me. Earth is 100% unnecessary because we are always
fantastic
going to end up
point.
in heaven with a God that is controlling us, where he does not allow for the bad things and yet still somehow provides the pleasurable things. So if it is a good thing that can exist without all of the bad things, make this make sense to me. This is honestly one of my biggest problems, not just with the concept of heaven, but with all of the belief system in God in general, mainly because it ties to my connection with the problem of evil or the problem of suffering, and the indefensible excuse of free will completely falls on its face when you consider the realities and the setup of heaven according to the Bible. We could talk about this topic for 3 hours, for 10 hours, for 2 weeks. Like, this is endless to me. This is of so much interest. There are so many little caveats and so many things to iron out, but I think I've given you the general idea of it, and feel free to argue any remaining points you have.
All right, and then let's
because
see if
I've
the
looked
next
into
one is...
them. I'm very interested in this, and I have found it absolutely inexcusable. Point 4, and I'm worried I might end up redundant here, but I'm going to try to hit on the idea of perfection and of stagnation. So despite the point that we just went through, I really actually understand to a degree the concept that one cannot appreciate the good things in life without some understanding of the bad things in life. The problem is there's so much bad and suffering in this world that the good does not outweigh it, and I don't think it's as easy as a one-to-one compensation or even a heaven-to-earth compensation, right? Should 4 children have to starve to death in the next few minutes for me to appreciate the next meal that I'm going to get? Is that the idea? Is that the trade-off that has to happen? How many young women need to be raped for other women to appreciate being in a good relationship, right? These are just inexcusable and immoral ideas to me that that we had to have this level of suffering. God did control this. God did set up the arrangement.
Yep.
He is at some point holding the puppet strings, and he has made certain barriers within when he will intervene, when he won't, what the initial setup is, how capable we are as individuals of doing things to other individuals, etc. Like, there are limits that he has put on our earthly existence. And within those limits, he is still allowed for this amount of suffering versus this amount of pleasure. It does not add up. It is horrible all on its own without adding in the heaven factor. But there are some things. Let's go back to my example of taking up a hobby. What makes a hobby enjoyable? Well, we actually have a lot of research on this from a neuroscience standpoint, where we understand that really it's the process of achieving a goal that is so desirable, that is so enjoyable. It's not reaching that, right? I'm someone who for a number of years was very heavy into endurance sports, and it is always fun to cross the finish line on your first ultra marathon. That was a big goal I had, and I've done a lot of them now, and I've done longer distances, and each time it's exciting and there's a huge sense of accomplishment, but it's immediately over. And what I realized I was enjoying the whole time was the achievement of getting better, right? Setting a new PR in training, upping my weekly mileage, learning how to deal with that injury better, going for that run when it was really cold and snowy or really rainy or 105 degrees and humid, seeing myself grow in self-discipline, seeing myself push through and become more mentally tough and stable. These were the true treasures, but they were only treasures because there were days when I quit. I didn't go on the run in the rain because I couldn't run as fast, because I couldn't make it all the way up that hill without stopping. Those are the pains that make the pleasures worth it. So again, I understand that to a certain extent. I don't understand it to the extent that we're excusing all the horrors of this world. But in heaven, to get back to my point here, there can't be any of that. So yes, on one hand, inexcusable with the free will concept and being robots in heaven, but on the other hand, we should need small amounts of things not working out or going wrong to be able to enjoy anything. I just imagine heaven being a place of pure stagnation. Think about how gross water becomes when it sits versus when it flows in the river. You've probably heard the old adage, if you're not growing, you're dying, kind of a thing. What is it like to be the exact same level of anything forever? It terrifies me. That sounds like true torture. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, heaven is so bad that hell all of a sudden seems better. No, hell is the worst of all worst possible things, but heaven is still awful. What does it mean to be perfect in a perfect state with a perfect body forever? It means nothing. It means absolutely nothing for Christians that are so hung up on meaning, right? Where do we get our meaning in life? The only answer you can muster is God, and then you get him forever. And then what does it mean? What does it mean? It means nothing. I'm blown away that there are not more people constantly deconverting because of the very concept of heaven. Never mind hell. But let's move on to a related topic here, which is identity and
all right,
memory.
so let's just quickly, free will and imperfection. Did you have any extra thoughts about those?
Well,
You're making great points.
let's go back to carbon fiber for YouTube, punk. Um, a lot of people will think using some of these exotic materials, carbon fiber has been around a long time, it makes it better than what you have already. It may not. I mean, there may be aspects of it being better, right? You get the lightness, there's extra strength. Did you need the lightness? Did you need the strength? You may not need either. So with the concept of perfection, that's something we may be striving for. When I was building beach cruisers, I had a customer who I delivered one to him. This is a fairly well-off guy, and he paid me $2,100 for this thing. And when I took it out of the back, or he helped me take it out of the back of my SUV, I saw the look on his face. He had just spent minutes telling me how he was going to use it and enjoy it and have all this fun. And when he saw it in person, I can tell by the look on his face, it was as if all that was now void. It was perfect. He says, I knew it was nice from the pictures, but I didn't know it would be this nice. And I told him, and yeah, man, get out there, ride it around, enjoy it. That's what it's for. I don't think he ever did. And I got to the point where I would tell customers, hey, I'll give you $50 back if you just send me a picture with you on this, writing it somewhere.
Wow.
No one ever did. Not one person ever did. And I only know of
So you
3
think they
people
just
that
became
actually.
art pieces?
I had a guy. There's this attorney here in Los Angeles. He bought 2 of them for me. He says that's exactly what he does with them. He says there's one in my office that I have now. It's on a display.
Wow.
He's like a Manhattan Beach attorney. He's got serious bucks. He said it's on display, and I got to build a display for this too. So when he bought the second one, I have to build a display for that too. I'm like, really?
Oh my
You don't use it?
goodness.
He goes, no, dude, these are artwork. And I'm like, I don't know about that.
Wow.
But I did build a few where I said I could see why no one would ever use this. I could see why you would just let it sit somewhere that you walk past a lot and stare at it. And I have one of those myself. I will never. I told my fiance, I'm just so you know, I consider this a piece of artwork. It's one of the last ones I'm going to do. It has some imperfections in the powder coating, and the guy wouldn't redo it, and I got sick of it. And I said, well, I'm not going to sell it to anybody. I'll just make an art piece out of it. And it looks amazing. I'll send you a picture. It looks
Sure.
amazing. It looks amazing. So, but the problem with, I'd say, perfection, if you will, is that in a way it renders something useless.
Right.
So imagine you paid. This is not like a picture. I got something my ex-girlfriend drew. She's an artist. She drew something. I like it. That's just going to sit on the wall. It's the only thing it's good for. Can't do anything. Can't do anything else with it. With the activities that we all do, be it skiing or the things he described, woodworking or stuff, there's something powerful to gaining understanding, right? The lessons. I'm not talking about failure, because failure can really crush people. But those little victories where we learn more and we don't begin perfect and we don't end that way. It's just forever striving towards the goal, right?
Right.
And getting close, right? Getting close. There's something very powerful about that. And it's often a personal experience that isn't about outside recognition. And that's the
Right.
key. It's not about outside recognition, but heaven is. Heaven is about God recognizing you for being one of his super fans, and you get on his OnlyFans list, and then you march right past the apostles to get your thumbs up from God and Jesus. They're standing there doing clapping for you with the other angels, and then you go stand in line somewhere and just start worshiping.
Yeah, and then you become an art piece.
You become an art piece. Essentially, you become, I don't know, it's not bad to say you become a slave. Paul talks about being a slave for Christ.
Oh, they're all
In this
about
life.
the slavery imagery until somebody from the outside brings it up.
Yeah. So AR asks, what age are you in heaven? 10, 20, 30, 60, or 80?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to be 25 again.
I it's funny. I sing a bit. I don't try to make a big deal out of it, but I sing a bit. And I wrote a song that talked about somebody knocking on my door and proselytizing, and the chorus is basically, I hope you do see heaven before you die. Like me telling the person, like, you're not going to find it up there, buddy. It's right here. This is as close as you're ever going to get to anything called heaven.
That's right.
And you can enjoy your life right now, and it can be so wonderful and so blissful. And the contract is what you make with your friends and family. That's what makes it sweet. You might have a pretty awesome job too, if you're lucky, or enough money that you don't need to have a day job. But it's not about up there in the sky. I've said this on Hot Program before too, and I should have told my fiance to do this when she took her flight last week. Tell me if you see heaven when you're up there. On my first flight from Indiana to Los Angeles, I looked out the window as a 23 years old guy, and I said, I wonder where heaven is, as we were coming through the clouds, right?
Yep.
And flying above that first layer of clouds, I had my eyes open with great enthusiasm. Now, that's super naive. But had it not been me, I don't know that I'd understand it if someone else had said that to me. But if you are a believer and you're going to take your first airplane ride, look around. get the window seat if you're not terrified of heights. Get the window seat and let us know here on Hot Program if you see heaven.
All right. Let's keep going. Yeah, love it. It's a great
or
challenge.
consistency. I think that this is something really interesting to consider. We are told that in some sense, again, I don't care if you want to argue for a spiritual body, our physical body, or just a soul or spirit kind of floating up there, which I think that one is the most problematic one. So for this, let's imagine we're in some kind of a bodily form. We are told that we will be able to recognize other people. That's why people love the concept of heaven. When they lose a child and they've convinced themselves this child has gone to heaven, they now want to live their life in a way that makes sure they go to heaven so they can be reunited with that child. Well, what does that mean, right? What is that going to look like? Here's a question. Will you still have your memories from this time on earth in heaven? I doubt it, and here's why. Once again, that verse in Revelation provides us with so much ammunition. There are no tears, death, sorrow, or sin. How much sorrow do you have when you think about your life? You might have the best life ever. You might have every single thing that provides you with meaning and purpose and beauty in your life. And I bet when you think through your memories, you are filled with sorrow. And then again, whatever age you are as you're listening to this, imagine being at the end of your life, right? Whenever that life ends, you don't think you'll have ever had any regrets. You don't think you'll ever have anyone that you miss. What about the people who don't know God and they're in hell or oblivion or whatever? They're not with you. If you have a memory of them, if you have a concept of who you were and what you did on this earth and the people you hurt and the people that you hurt that can't be in heaven because they didn't think or were convinced of the right thing, how do you think that's going to go? You simply cannot be able to have these memories, this same conscious continuum. So what is your identity in heaven? How are you recognizing people? How are you holding on to your past? Because to hold on to your past at all, to be the same person, like this is a really fun kind of ship of Theseus kind of philosophical thought experiment here. To what degree are you still you?
They actually say no. They say normally they normally say no. You won't be able to miss your loved ones.
Of your will, some part of your nature, some part of your memory, some part of your previous existence, right? To really be able to ensure no tears, death, sorrow, or sin, you are being manipulated into some newer creation. And to what extent can you have that done until you are no longer yourself? Yeah. I believe it would happen almost immediately. It would break down. You would almost immediately have to be considered something entirely new. And for God to work all these things out, I think he's going to have to rob you of entirely who you were. If you're a mother and a wife right now on earth, and your husband, like me, deconverts, and one of your children follows his example and never believes, and your other child does believe, when you die, somehow you have one child that believed correctly with you in heaven, but not your husband and not your other child. How is this going to go for you? Are you going to look at that one child in heaven, somehow recognizing them, somehow experiencing them, somehow appreciating them without being able to think about your other child and your husband? Can you separate that out? Does God have to rob you of those memories? One of the sickest answers I've heard is that when we are in heaven and we are so filled with the presence of God, we will delight even in our loved ones burning in hell, because the justice
That's the standard
of
response.
God is so beautiful.
That's the standard response.
So clearly when we are in his power and glory. Not only is this a complete assertion that there is no backing for whatsoever, but it is one of the most grotesque ideas in the world, that God, who supposedly gives us family, instills in us the need to care, tend, and love to them, to develop with them, to communicate with them, to grow with them on this time in earth, would have us just fine, have that wife just fine with one of her children up in heaven, looking down like we see happens in the Bible, and being glad that her sweet little child, whose only sin was listening to its father and not being convinced of all of the dumb assertions that are supposed to be spiritual truths, burning and being tortured for eternity. If there is a God that would construct that kind of a setup, that's disgusting. If there is a God who would negate all that and just erase the memory, that is disgusting. You have been robbed of your identity. You have been robbed again of your free will. You are a slave. You are a worship slave. The Egyptians had slaves of the Israelites to work. Fine. It's nothing compared to wiping away your entire identity, forcing you to the floor, and spending eons and infinity doing nothing other than proclaiming the greatness of this God who did all those things. This is abhorrent. But I digress. Two last problems here. Let's talk about fairness.
All right, let's hit them so we can.
I'm going to, again, major in the majors here, and let's just say that belief is what gets you there. Let's look at John's gospel. Believe and be saved. I tell you these things so you can know and be assured, right? Believe and be saved. You made it. You're there. You're in heaven. However, there are layers to heaven. There are different mansions. There are different levels of crowns that we can earn for ourselves based off our moral acts here on earth. And this, again, is we have to put aside that some people think it is our works that will get us to heaven. Let's just assume, however it happens, the people that make it to heaven make it to heaven. Think about the layers of unfairness that are going to exist in heaven. What is the point of a physical reward in heaven if you can't feel better about it than what someone else has? Like, think about this for a second. If there's no suffering in heaven, there's no sadness in heaven, then the person here who did not achieve this, they don't know what they're missing. They can't comprehend that. And the person who has this has no reason to enjoy it more than the person down here. Like, do you guys understand that? There's often the verses about the gnashing of teeth. There's one interpretation, a concept that this is actually for the believers in heaven on everything in heaven that they will lose out on because they didn't do what they were supposed to on earth. That's where the disappointment
can we
comes
pause it
from,
real quick?
because there is this supposed class system in heaven.
Okay. The way my screen is on my phone, I can't read AR's comment that he made a moment ago about his grandmother pocket locker. Can you see that? Thank you. I struggled with this because my grandma was Catholic, and I thought maybe she'd go to hell because another Christian I respected at the time told me Catholics weren't Christians, like Mormons and JWs. Okay, Jehovah's Witnesses. That's JWs. This is a huge problem. So as we can see, AR is explaining to us that he had some trouble with this. It would be wonderful if the Bible were more plain, direct, and understandable. Imagine if it were, AR wouldn't have had to have that feeling. He simply could have looked something up himself, or that Christian would have shared the proper opinion with him. They're believers. They believe that Jesus Christ is their Lord and Savior. If they've repented and are baptized, they're on their way. I think the idea of storing up treasures in heaven is an interesting one. But as the host of that show is detailing here, what it immediately makes me think of, wait. The Bible tells us God is no respecter of persons. What that means is that there's someone here on earth that is of high status. That individual is no more important to him than someone who's poverty-stricken and barely can feed themselves.
Right.
So what we're hearing here is that no. Evidently, there's some sort of point system where you can turn in you can redeem your points. God has an app, evidently. You can redeem the points you've earned by going to the drive-through or maybe dining in to get rewards in heaven. Why would that be the case? Why would that ever be the case?
Yes, and it's also immoral that most people in the past, in the present, and in the future are not going to be there through essentially no fault of their own. And so the exclusivity, this idea, and that's again, like I don't know why we cozy on up to this, but it's an abusive relationship. Again, if you were in my life and you told me you were part of a chosen master race that is literally going to inherit the kingdom because you're better than everybody else, yeah, you'd have to correct that belief quickly or you would no longer be a part of my life. We allow Christians to have this arrogance about them, this and when they really get to it, don't let them get annoyed with you because the threat will come out immediately. You're gonna burn, or I hate to see what happened to the people who don't believe the way I believe. But again, how is that moral? So to me, it's the ultimate example of bigotry, racism, however you want to say it, but they literally believe that their group is entitled to eternal life. Everyone else is going to receive eternal torment. and they are okay with that. Not only okay with it, they're donating their money to that, they're worshiping that, they're singing songs about that. It's monstrous, but yeah, that's the exclusivity of it.
And there may be Christians who sincerely feel, well, when there may be things about the gospel they don't like, right? Like Jesus slaying people with the sword of his mouth and then sitting in hell forever if they're not found in the book of life, right? They may try to plead with Jesus, sort of like Lot does before Sodom and Gomorrah get destroyed, you know. It may be a situation like that where naively they think that God's going to really listen to them. But they are taught you're supposed to be here on earth praying for God to intercede and do things on your behalf, interrupt his own will for the sake of your happiness, your fulfillment.
Mm. All right, let's wrap this up.
And you only get the 70 years or whatever it is on Earth to develop what it's going to be, and then bam, now you're stuck. So what happens about the unreached people group? They get reached, and there's an 80-year-old man in the tribe, and he hears about Jesus from some missionary, and he accepts it right there, and he does one good deed, and then bam, he dies. Now he's in heaven, no fault of his own. He's the lowest tier in heaven, and that's it for infinity. Right? Like, that's insane. You can't progress once you're there. And if you can progress once you're there, which is sometimes the argument I've heard as I've tried to research the subject, how can you be better in heaven? Can
you're already perfect.
Louder? Can you have a better voice? Can you be
just doesn't
more
make any
moral?
sense.
How can one be more moral than another one if there's nothing
freeway
cleanup as a comparison guide?
Adopt
this
the highway.
Doesn't make sense, you guys. Heaven does not make sense.
Adopt the highway to heaven.
To our final point here, and this is, I think, the number one point of all of them.
All right, let's hear it.
With paradise is that it's not real. It is a hypothetical trade. You are trading today, this life, these next however many decades you get. The only thing that is guaranteed to you, because I don't care what you believe, I don't care how many near-death experience stories have convinced you, the only thing you can 100% know is that you are here now experiencing what you are experiencing, creating the life that you are creating. That's it. That's all you get. And you are going to trade that, the only sheer thing, for a completely hypothetical possibility. This robs you of your autonomy here on earth. This robs you of the beauty of the finite. This robs you of the chance to really create for yourself a life that is meaningful now, that's meaning is wrapped into the fact that it will end. This is like a reverse Pascal's wager. What if you're wrong and you waste the only life you ever get? But Brandon, I mean, still, eternity outweighs 80 years, 90 years, 100 years. How sad. How sad that you're forced to make that kind of a wager, that you would be willing to give up these decades of the most beautiful thing that can happen. Now, not everyone has a beautiful life, but for those of us that are lucky enough to live in a certain kind of first world country or have access to healthcare and a home and consistent food and shelter, then on top of that, be able to enjoy things like friends or family, to have individual interests and hobbies and passions. Just, you're going to chuck it away because someone instilled enough fear in you that if you didn't surrender this life, you would not inherit the next. This is the greatest robbery of all time. Your life has been stolen out from under you, and you are willfully giving it away, thinking that you are the one that's coming out on top. This is the worst trade you can ever imagine. I am honestly so sad. I see these Christians with good intentions, worshiping, spending their time doing the things they think they need to do, denying themselves often, giving up their cross, the ones that are being consistent, and they're missing out. They're losing. They lose relationships because they hold too tightly. How many Christians have you heard whose parents won't speak to them anymore because they deconverted, whose friend groups got destroyed because someone didn't believe like them anymore? People are putting a hierarchy of value on God and the afterlife, which is really selfishly here. What they're actually putting as a hierarchy is their future potential pleasure. It is more important for me to go to heaven than it is for me to treat my family well. Even Jesus says as much, right? When he thinks the end is actually coming, what does he tell everyone to do? It doesn't matter anymore, guys. Don't store up treasures here. Don't save for retirement. Don't care about your family. There's only one thing that matters now. The kingdom of heaven is coming. This false promise for 2,000 years, and of course with all the other religions and every other ideology beforehand, has kept people from living their best life. And then don't even get me started on the decisions that we're making or not making correctly because of this. The people, the world, the resources we're not taking care of because we simply think it doesn't matter. It's all going to end anyways. No, it's all going to end. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy because we aren't doing anything with our stewardship over this planet. And how could we? How could we make good decisions when we think that inexistence is right around the corner? This makes us bad at decisions. This makes us bad at connection and family and love. This makes us bad at valuing things. This makes us bad at accepting things. This makes us bad at everything. The problem of paradise is that it is not real and it is a true thief, a murderer of anything potentially good in this lifetime. I am quite passionate about this topic, and I believe for good reason. People are just losing their lives, the only lives they're ever going to have, and off such little, if not no evidence, and such bad assertions, such easily falsifiable allegations of who this God is, how he exists, what he wants from us, and what we should be doing with our lives. It's nonsense. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Let me know any other problems you have with heaven. Let me know any arguments you had against mine. I think that this is a very undervalued topic in this space. So do me a favor and share this one. Watch it again. Watch it all the way through.
All right, we'll go ahead and
give it a like, give it a
the
nice
video
comment.
real quick.
I think that this
over on Mindshift. I think that was fantastic. And yeah, I agree with him. This is an important topic. We spent, like I said, hell tends to get a lot of time. And it's easy for Christians to step away from because it's not what they're seeking after. It's really just the threat. And a lot of them will just straight up tell you they don't believe it or it's not important to them. They won't say that about heaven. And I think that's sort of a real wedge to get into to start discussing the immorality of the entire Christian doctrine. Because to me, heaven is the moral of the story. It is the big point, and I can't imagine anything worse.
Well, hell, but it's just as bad. I think it's just as bad. The idea that you will be punished, maybe when you really think about it, both are punishments. One is a physical torture that will mentally become torture as well. And one's a mental torture that you may never feel any pain associated with it, right? Your body isn't going to rot away or burn away, but your mind will. I think your mind would. I think the desire to continue on would. Many moons ago, I wrote a story when I was writing screenplays. It's called As It Is in Heaven. And there was this angel who was just tired of being an angel. He's just tired of it. I wasn't an atheist when I wrote that. I believed in God, but he just, it's sort of the same all the time. So, I think it's something that wasn't well thought through when the writers of the Bible were writing it, though they may have thoroughly believed it to be true, right? Based on previous iterations of the lore that they then just took over and enhanced.
Yeah.
And again, they just have the belief that it's true. They don't have proof. They don't have evidence. Yeah. And regardless of how much the God of the Bible, quote unquote, made Israel suffer, large groups of people stayed faithful. Why? Because God would eventually rescue them out of whatever calamity that he had allowed to come upon them or that he caused to come upon them. So by that, they could then say, well, God is merciful.
It almost feels as a natural. Oh, good.
No, I mean, it's just the game is rigged. It doesn't matter what the outcome is. The answer is the same. You're witnessing God's mercy. Even in punishing you, he's ultimately going to be merciful for you. When you read the Old Testament, it talks about, well, centuries later, I will punish them. Wait, what do you mean punish them? They're all dead. centuries later. Their children's children. Children. You're not going to punish them.
Right.
But people probably didn't think about it that way. You know, they're just happy. Like, one day our people will get their retribution. There's probably people in Israel right now saying, finally, right? Finally.
Yeah.
When most of those Palestinians had nothing to do with ever harming another human being. It's just a small select group, and they're all getting walked on for it. You know, it's just sad.
It is. I think it seems like a natural progression of the kingdom of God, like, concept. It's never showing up. It's never going to happen. So you push it, and eventually it just gets pushed beyond the grave. It gets pushed to an eternal, ethereal kingdom, timeless, spaceless, immaterial kingdom. So
they figured it out. Unlike Trump, who always says in 2 weeks. It's no,
dude.
Right. After you die, after I die, not in 2 weeks though, but after you die, yeah, that's when it's all going down. Oh, okay. I'll keep a lookout. How can you? You'll be dead. No. Well, my ancestors will keep a lookout.
Yeah, a divine inheritance. And yeah, I personally struggle with the ways in which I feel like as a non-believer, I've like lost the support of family and friends, really just for being honest, for living my truth, as they'd say. I know there's a lot of different marginalized groups that happens to, but I really do feel that as an atheist, it's just super hard, and you can't help but feel like, man, if these people didn't believe this stuff, if they really understood that this is the only life we have, how much better would we treat each other? And it's one of the reasons why I don't think Christianity makes people better. I don't think it makes them treat their family and friends better. I think it costs us when it comes to relating to our family and friends. And it's weird. I think it's just an identity that people feel they've asserted now that they have to remain consistent with. So they are, sort of taking on all these extra absurd beliefs and claims just to remain consistent with their Christian identity. When I think if they really allow themselves to think about it, they probably realize that they don't independently buy into these ideas on their own. They've just sort of accepted it as part of the Christian package, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's when you get the packet, your welcome packet from Christianity, that's in there.
Yeah, that's another thing that strikes me about all this is that, on the way in, they're selling you how great everything is. You just have to believe everything's going to be wonderful. You're going to have this great relationship with God. He's going to bless you. You're going to get all the kingdoms of heaven, the riches of heaven poured out onto you. And then once you're in the faith, it's, well, were you lusting after another woman? Did you jerk off last night? Are you friends with this homosexual? I mean, it becomes, the sales pitch is you don't have to do it. Just believe. And then once you're inside, oh my goodness, there's no end to the rules and the judgment and the hoops you have to go through. So it's a pretty dishonest sales pitch to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, my one black friend, you want to give us your closing thoughts about this? Any of this stuff, heaven nonsense?
I'd say, what's that old adage? It talks about looking after, listening to people who are still looking for the answers, not people that have found them. I think Christianity purports to have the answer and not to be in the search for the answer. You may have some, but I don't think they have them. I don't think they have them all. And I do believe that this conversation is the one we ought to be having with religious people when they're pitching Christianity to us, or whatever the faith is.
Right,
talk about talk about the true end times. The true end times would be the end of eternity. And when the heck does that happen? if you are to continue forever and ever and ever, which sounds longer than forever in my ears, how does that go? Think of the song Amazing Grace, the only song I probably dislike. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we'll have no less days to sing his praise than when we first begun.
Mm, mm.
Crap, people. You're
And that's
not
what I
even
mean.
getting started.
You can't
You're
even.
not even getting started after 10,000 years.
That's what I'm saying. It could be a trillion years, and you're just getting started.
You'll
There's
have no
no.
less days to sing his praise than when you
Yeah, I
first
mean,
begun.
we're technically in the infancy of the universe, according to these people. And that's the funny thing is they deny deep time a lot of times in the natural world. You know, they deny evolution, and they don't comprehend that the universe is billions of years old, or the age of the Earth and things like that. But they'll sign up real quick for that eternity in the sky, not realizing, oh my goodness, it's incomprehensible. So yeah, it really is
Eternal
absurd.
church torment list.
Exactly. All right, gang, that's going to do it for us. This was super fun. Thank you all so much for tuning
Thank
in.
you.
Really, really appreciate it. Please like the video, subscribe to the channels, share the videos if you can.
Yes.
Really appreciate that. Leave us a comment if you're watching later. All right, gang, be good to yourselves.
And each other.